merupakan kawan lama Singh dalam bidang guaman, khasnya dalam zaman 70-an. Majlis seterusnya dengan segala hormatnya ingin menjemput Dato' Kumar Rendran untuk memberikan ucapan. Persilakan.
Mrs. Karpal Singh, Jagdeep, Govind, Chairman, Penang, DAP, Chairman, Honorable Chief Minister, Honorable Lim Waneng, and my close friend, Right Honorable Lim Kit Siang, was my classmate 5 to 6 years in Karpal High School. I've been asked by the family of the late Right Honorable Karpal Singh to give a tribute on the life of one of Malaysia's leading figures, who was loved by his family, respected by his fellow members of the bar, feared by opposing politicians, and admired greatly by his constituents. I am deeply honored and extremely proud to have been asked to say a few words about my old friend, a real legend, a great legend. No doubt all of you would have known him as a great figure within DAP, the Honourable Member of Parliament to his royal constituents, and a wonderful husband and a father to his loving family. Karpal Singh, most fondly referred to as Karpal by me, was a very close friend and a fellow practitioner, and the man whom I was lucky to be beside with when we both began our legal careers together in 1970. I happen also honored to be a witness to the civil marriage between Karpal and Rumit Kaur in July 1970. Karpal had become a world-class criminal lawyer, and he took on many cases and didn't have any hesitation acting for clients, including those accused of communist insurgency and those waging war against the king, as his duty and obligations was to the rights of the accused person and to much higher cause, that of justice. Karpal became well known for taking on whomever he felt was unjust, unfair in the interpretation of the law or procedures in the legal system. And he was soon seen rarely by the bench, feared by the prosecution and other opponents, and admired by the legal brethren and clients. I would like to refer to the recent judgment of Dato' Sri Anwar Ibrahim's Sodomy II appeal, where the Court of Appeal made insinuations against the defense for delaying the appeal by filing various applications. Let me tell you and let me assure you that every application made by Karpal, including to recluse some of the judges of hearing the appeal on the basis of biasness, to disqualify Tan Sri Shafi Abdullah from conducting the appeal, and to bring in fresh evidence, were all done in accordance to the interests of justice. The Court of Appeal was therefore wrong and unfair to have made such insinuation. I call upon Govind and Ram Singh to take this matter up at the correct forum. The fearless Karpal Singh. One such instance when we both appeared for a matter before Justice Fred Alundum at the Penang High Court. And from the start, the judge was trying to put Karpal in his place, especially in this habeas corpus case, which was against the government. However, Karpal would have none of that and stood his ground and took on the judge. At one point, the judge threatened Karpal with contempt in court and even with imprisonment, as Karpal told him in no uncertain terms he was biased. In fact, the judge had asked him to apologize to Karpal, and Karpal, as we all know him, refused and reiterated that the judge was biased. The judge had accused both of us of delaying justice, but Karpal reiterated that we were carrying out our duty as legal representatives and officers of the court. When he threatened with contempt, Karpal with no way backed down, and later the judge had no choice but to back down himself. And that was Karpal that we all have come to know in the many years that followed. Another instance I would like to share with you all, I remember well was when my client was assaulted badly in the police lockup, and he was advised by me and Karpal to make a police report. I recall the CPO, the OCCI at the time, made my client in turn to lodge a report against me for false reporting. When my client was referred to the hospital for treatment, Karpal and I went to see him by the police, but the police had already gotten to the doctor. We found out the doctor's report on the cane marks found on my client's legs were as a result of sleeping on a long bench in the lockup and not due to the assault. I lost my temper and confronted the doctor and told him that his conclusions were preposterous and was done to please the police. The police thereafter made the doctor lodge a report against me for criminal intimidation. Karpal was with me all this time, and he stood by me and fought to make sure no trumped-up criminal charges were preferred against me. Karpal was a good friend, was with me to take a deal. Most notably, in 1975, when I was cited for contempt of court by the Sessions Court and sentenced to 2 days imprisonment, I was not lucky as Karpal, because the judge did not fear me. As soon as the order was given of detention for me, I managed to contact Karpal, and he rushed in from Alostar in his Volkswagen, appeared in court, applied for bail, got me out free. And later on, he, together with the late S.P. Srinivasagam, the late R.R. Chalaya, appeared for me in the High Court and set aside the contempt proceedings. But the judge had referred me to the disciplinary inquiry to be judged by the peers. During this difficult period of time, waiting for the inquiry, Karpal came forward and assisted me in conducting some of the cases in the High Court and the Court of Appeal. And he did not collect any fees for my clients, neither did he share any fees with me. One of the proudest moments in my career was when Karpal and myself, together with Balasundram, traveled to London in 1977 to appear at the Privy Council way back when Malaysia was still subject to the jurisdiction of the Privy Council. It was Karpal and my first case in the Privy Council. At my request, he agreed to appear with me without charging any fees, because my clients were not in a position to pay fees. In fact, Karpal paid for his own airfare to London and for the expense incurred while he was there. He did so because he felt that my clients were wrongly detained under the detention board. On the day of the hearing at the Privy Council, we had to don wigs which you see in that photograph. And we had rented those wigs from the rope makers of Eden Ravenscourt. And we all then took photographs at the steps of Privy Council. When I saw the photo of him that stood in front of the coffin, the 17th of April, I was very emotional. I remembered it as it was yesterday, as I had taken the photographs of him that day in London. Very recently, on Thaipusam Day this year, when I visited him at his house, I reminded him of the photograph, which was placed in his living room, that it was the very photograph taken by me using my camera. That is the photograph. He will be, of course, be remembered for fighting against oppression and paid the price heavily when against unfair odds. He was detained in Lalang in 1987 for 2 years, and that is the heaviest price for a lawyer to sacrifice, that of his liberty and freedom to voice his arguments. But his family stood by him all the way, which in turn gave him the strength he needed while inside. Karpal and myself were one of the very few, were the very first to challenge the draconian law that was the Internal Security Act. As a matter of principle and as a show of complete protest, we both boycotted the proceedings at the Supreme Court by not representing our clients and walked out. We did not abandon our client. We explained to them that we were doing what we were doing. We had their blessings. When we walked out, the American media carried the news which appeared in the Times magazine. Our actions of protest and walking out of the time had resulted in the government to take steps to amend some of the unfair and unjust provisions of the Internal Security Act. Another notable case I remember with Karpal involved 9 Hong Kong nationals of Chinese nationals arrested for drug trafficking, where they were represented by Karpal, myself, Dato' Rajasingham, and Dato' Sidambram. At the end of the trial, all but one of them were convicted. Even after we had lost the appeal, at the very last stage, Karpal rushed to the Supreme Court at the time with Dato' Sidam for reprieve on the grounds of that hanging was inhumane. And I remember that he did everything humanly possible till the very end, tried to save their lives. In the end, unfortunately, we couldn't. But that was who he was. He fought till the very end, and no one could ever accuse him of failing in his duty as a lawyer. This was something he used to make sure he fought for the rights of those he felt to be weak and unrepresented. He was truly a defender of our federal constitution, and as we have seen, right up until his untimely death, fought to defend the constitution, as well as the principles and the rights he always believed in. No doubt, there were those that disagreed with him and his views, and his attack against those he felt needed to be attacked. But whether they all disagreed or agreed with him and his views, each and every of them knew that this was the man who never gave up a fight, right down to the very day of his life was taken when he was on his way to do what he did best. Everyone held him in the highest regard and respect for his monumental courage in speaking his mind on what he believed was right. His untimely and very sudden death was a tragic loss to his dear wife, his children and grandchildren. The famous poet Thomas Campbell said it well: "To the lives in the hearts we leave behind is not to die." So Karpal will always be in our hearts. Karpal, it goes without saying, had brought up all his 5 children with the same integrity, honesty and courage, of which he was taught when he was young. And it can be clearly seen that those principles and values are firmly instilled in Jagdip, Gobind, Ram Karpal, and Sanjit, who all follow suit in their father's footsteps. His teachings, most importantly, his principles. In spite of his tight schedule as a lawyer and a politician, he never forgot about his social obligations. When I was back from a major surgery from UK, Kapal visited me in my house, spent 2 hours in talking to me about the good old days. They came even to my daughter's wedding. Kapal also attended the late Federal Court Justice Augustine Paul's funeral. Many criticized him for attending the funeral, as Justice Augustine Paul was a judge who convicted Anwar in his first sodomy trial. More so, the relationship between Karpal and Justice Augustine Paul was acrimonious. There was an instance when Justice Augustine Paul threatened Karpal with contempt. And there was another instance when Karpal, who was acting for the late Christopher Fernando in a contempt proceeding against Justice Augustine Paul, asked the presiding judge to issue a warrant of arrest against Justice Augustine Paul, failing to appear in court. Despite all this, Karpal attended the funeral of late Justice Augustine Paul. On a personal note, Karpal told me that Justice Augustine was his former university mate in the National University of Singapore, and that he had to pay his last respect to a university colleague. He told me that he hold no grudge or any ill feelings against Augustine Paul. So we see the human side of Karpal. Karpal is a lawyer who fought without fear of favor. I remember giving him a print of a famous quote by Justice John Philpott Curran, which is hanging in his chambers. And if I may read out the quote, it is the privilege, it is an obligation of those who have to defend a client on trial for life, to exert every force and to call forth every resources and the zeal and genius and sagacity can suggest. It is indulgence in the favor of life. It has the sanctity of usage. It has the permission of humanity. And the man who should linger one single step behind the most advanced limit of that privilege and should fail to exercise every talent that heaven has given him in the defense will be guilty of mean desertion of his duty and the abandonment of his client. Karpal, as a lawyer, lived by the very words of the court. I, for one, will miss him very much. We fought the same fight together in law side by side over the last 44 years. And I know a greater man than my friend Karpal, who I pray is resting in peace now. May his soul rest in peace. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Datuk Kumarendran. Ladies and gentlemen, in 1984, my father, the late P. Patu, was charged with illegal assembly and sedition for a DAP ceramah organized in Gopeng, Perak, in which Saudara Karpal Singh was his guest. Needless to say, he ended up being my father's lawyer and outsmarted the judiciary, and in a landmark ruling, won the case of P. Patu versus the CPO of Perak. A miracle somewhat that DAP had won a case against the police. Ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, I call upon Mr. Abdul Farid, representing the Penang Bar, to take stage.
Assalamualaikum and good evening. Yang berbahagia Puan Gurmit Kaur and the family members of Yang Berhormat Karpal Singh, Yang Amat Berhormat Tuan William Guan Eng, Chief Minister of Penang, Yang Berhormat exco members of the Penang State Government, Member of Parliament and State Assemblymen, ladies and gentlemen. When YB Jagdeep Singh called me last week and inquired as to whether I can be here tonight and say a few words about the late Yang Berhormat Karpal Singh, my mind actually wondered how could one just say a few words about a man who is a towering personality, a man who is an extraordinary human being. For so much have been written and spoken about this legend of the Penang Bar. It is an honor for me tonight to be here to represent the Penang Bar in the memory of the most famous and celebrated personality of the Penang and Malaysian Bar. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Karpal Singh was a lawyer of highest international repute whose steadfast adherence to the cause of justice and the rule of law was never weakened by the adversity that he faced. He was very good and became renowned for his work. He was a firm, fierce and fair lawyer. He had always maintained decorum in court. His strength was the forcefulness and brevity of his arguments, where he went straight to the point and did not waste time trying his luck with a long list of issues. He was tenacious. In the courtroom, Mr. Karpal was our best advocate in criminal law and constitutional law. Mr. Karpal Singh's name appears in around 600 reported cases in the law journals, from the High Court right up to the Privy Council, a testament to his diligence and passion. He had conducted numerous cases on a pro bono basis, especially cases involving capital punishment. He was a strong supporter of the Penang Legal Aid Center and had acted in numerous cases on his behalf to represent the poor and impecunious. Mr. Karpal has been an inspiration to many of us in the legal fraternity and will continue to inspire us in our pursuit of fairness and justice while imparting our duties as lawyers. On a personal note, I must say that I'm not very well acquainted with Mr. Karpal. As by the time I came in practice, YB Jagdeep was already manning the Penang office, while Mr. Karpal spent most of his time in Kuala Lumpur. However, whenever I meet him in court, I had never missed a chance to speak to him, as he had always had time to speak to fellow lawyers, both young and old, with humility, with no airs. The last time I met Mr. Karpal was about 2 or 3 months ago, when I was walking back from court to my office. I chanced upon him alighting from the ill-fated MPV with Yang Berhormat Raya in attendance. And despite so many things in his mind, Mr. Karpal inquired about the plans we have for the additional building that the bar bought for its members. This reflected his concern for the bar and its members. There's a Malay proverb which reads, "Harimau mati meninggalkan belang, manusia mati meninggalkan nama." But for Mr. Karpal Singh, beliau telah meninggalkan belang, nama dan jasa yang akan dikenang selama-lamanya. To Madam Gurumit Kaur, my friends YB Jagdeep and YB Gobin, and the children of Mr. Karpal, the demise of your beloved husband and father is a great loss to the legal profession, especially to the Penang Bar, which he belonged to, and undoubtedly, he was our most renowned member. In keeping with tradition, the Penang Bar will be organizing a reference proceedings for Mr. Karpal soon. Thank you.
Sekali lagi terima kasih kepada Encik Abdul Farid, Pengerusi Penang Bar Committee. Kawan-kawan yang saya sayangi, saya masih mengingatkan pada 3 hari bulan Mei tahun lalu di ke satu ceramah di halaman Kristal dekatan dengan sini, Saudara Karpal Singh telah memulakan ucapan beliau dengan menggunakan perkataan-perkataan berikut. Kawan-kawan, Lauho sudah mari sini dan Lauho ingin cakap, Oilang to. Ini merupakan permulaan ucapan Saudara Karpal Singh pada malam tersebut. Majlis dengan segala hormatnya ingin menjemput Cik Ramakrishnan, bekas Presiden aliran, untuk memberikan ucapan beliau. Dipersilakan.
Beloved members of the late YB Karpal Singh's family, respected leaders of DAP, friends, ladies and gentlemen. The passing of Karpal Singh had a shattering effect on me. It was, as it were, we had lost our hope. Such was the immense loss that we suffered. On the day of his funeral, I wanted to bid him farewell in my own personal and special way. This is the outpouring of a grieving heart. This is my goodbye. My dear Karpal, it is difficult to accept that you are no longer with us. For more than 4 decades, you are part of this landscape of the nation and very much part of our lives. Today, you are no more. It is well known that you are highly respected and greatly admired, but we did not know that you were also deeply loved. It took everyone by surprise. There was no way to know this. There was no indication. There was no expression of this affection in the past. While you were alive, there was no means or reason to measure the people's affection for you. In your death, we discovered that there was so much undeclared love for you. The outpouring of affection for you was simply incredible and astonishing. The people's affinity for you was totally overwhelming, dear Karpal. How well you are regarded by so many did not hit home until the crowd started coming in to pay their homage. They came, even in the rain, while you were in your coffin at home, in an unending stream of humanity. For 3 days, they came, all day long, without any let up. They continued to come at night as well. Many parked their cars far away and walked all the way to seek your resting place. They came from all over, dear Karpal. They came from all over the country. They came from overseas as well. Those known to you and those who hardly knew you in person. Those who have only heard of you and your caring nature, they all came. The titled personages, as well as the humble common person, we all came. From all walks of life, they came in reverence and with a sense of great personal loss. They walked past your coffin, lingered a while to say a silent prayer, looked at your still, lifeless body, and then they left the room, teary-eyed and in an emotional state of shock and turmoil. Many thousands came to your home, dear Karpal. The number was simply amazing. And it was also very comforting to know that your struggle on their behalf was not taken for granted. The struggle was truly and greatly appreciated. It was a gesture of genuine appreciation for your lifelong contribution for the welfare of the nation. It was a show of gratitude for your unwavering stand in the defense of truth and justice. It was a mark of the esteem for you because you provided a voice for the voiceless and the powerless. Dear Karpal, as they continuously came and went, perhaps it is too difficult to put a figure on the number of people who came on those 3 days. But we all got the feeling that it was an impressive, huge crowd running into thousands that came to get a glimpse of you and convey their condolences to your family. For those wondering why so many people came to your house, the banner outside your house said it all. Karpal, you were always there for us. Now we are here for you. But Karpal, impressive as the crowd was at your residence, it was nothing compared to the sea of people who turned up on the day of your funeral. It was a massive, emotionally charged crowd that turned up on Sunday, 20th April 2014 at the Devonshire P.Pinang to bid their last farewell to you. For 2 hours, they streamed past your coffin, grief-stricken and utterly devastated. They came in grief to share their sorrow with your family. They wanted your family to know it wasn't only your family's loss, but theirs as well. They all wanted to be part of this great tragedy that had befallen this nation. They had to be there to bid farewell to you on your final journey, dear Karpal. These were common people from all walks of life who came, young and old, a multi-ethnic crowd, to be there for you. They stood in the sun and they stood with a heavy heart over the loss of a friend who gave hope and inspired them by standing up for the rule of law. They remembered that you fought tyranny and oppression, both in Parliament and in the courts, without fear or favor. They remembered that you stood up for the downtrodden. They remembered that you spoke up for the oppressed. They remembered that you fought their battles all the time, not caring for the consequence. They remembered this, dear Karpal, so they came to say their last farewell to their hero. They were heartbroken, dear Karpal. Their hopes were shattered in your untimely death. They mourned that their champion was no more with them to fight their battles. Dear Karpal, they hugged your portrait and held it close to their hearts as to give meaning to the proclamation on a banner that read, "You will always be in our hearts." Your comrades in arms were there, all of them, looking solemn and somber, with a forlorn look on their troubled faces. Your death that suddenly and forever severed the many decades of friendship that was difficult for them to accept. How they suffered this loss. In this greedy and unfair world where money seems so important, you acted pro bono for many without any consideration for their color or creed, because justice was blind. And you gave your all when you fought their battles. They remembered that as well, dear Karpal. Anwar also revealed for the first time that he refused payment for taking up his marathon case. When Anwar's family tried several times to pay you, you told Anwar to tell his family not to disturb you. 3 hotels recorded full occupancy, dear Karpal. The Waterfall Hotel, the nearest to your house, with 48 rooms, they were all taken up. The 231-room Grand Continental Hotel, the nearest to the Sikh temple, was fully occupied. The Citytel Hotel had many friends and family members of yours checking into it. The hotel has 451 rooms, which were fully booked from Friday. The florists on the island were all busy with activity as they received hundreds of orders for wreaths and flowers to be delivered to your residence. There was also an order for a bouquet which cost 1,000 ringgit. They all wanted to give you a floral tribute. It was another form of affection for you. Dear Karpal, it is said, death ends a life, not a relationship. That's why they came to perpetuate that relationship. That relationship will live on, no doubt about that. And dear Karpal, it is also said, the life of the dead is placed in the memory of the living. How true it is. They remembered you as a crusader, a warrior, and a champion for truth and justice. You will live on in our collective memory. With all these fond memories of your gallant fight to preserve our constitutional guarantees and to defend the rule of law, it is so difficult to bid you farewell, dear Karpal. It is so hard to say goodbye, dear Karpal. Thank you.
Thank you, Sir Ramakrishnan, on that very touching tribute. Ladies and gentlemen, there is an old saying that raw gold must go through many fires before it becomes a 24-karat gold. So must a man. And through many fires did our dear Karpal Singh go through for a Malaysian Malaysia, where every Malaysian is not judged by the color of his skin, race or religion, but as equals under the Malaysian sun. Our next speaker is a man who had travelled to Kuala Lumpur to pay his respect to Saudara Karpal there, and is now here with us to bid farewell. I call upon the gentle A. Samad Said, or fondly known as Pak Samad, to share his thoughts on the Tiger of Jeluto.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Khusus dan keluarga yang Karpal yang sangat saya hormati, Ketua Menteri Lingkungan yang saya sangat simpati, Saudara Karpal Singh, dan yang sangat kasihi Saudara Kenangan. Ini adalah malam yang ketiga saya membacakan sebuah puisi. Saya tulis 24 hari bulan April untuk menyatakan rasa keharuan saya terhadap seorang pemimpin yang dikatakan sangat garang untuk memperjuangkan hak asasi. Dan tokoh itu sekarang memang sudah tidak ada, tapi saya merasakan ketiadaannya akan terus ada. Saya merakamkan dalam sebuah puisi yang telah saya baca di Kuala Lumpur, di Johor, dan sekarang judulnya Eligi Seorang Pemberani kepada Karpal Singh. Sesekali bila wira mapan pergi, membekal pesan waras, pedas, dan bumbu, terbisi suara seranum-ranumnya dan gemanya menjadi benih sejarah. Bila merpati terbang dan kuntum kembang, waktu buku siasa cermat terbentang, titislah pesan yang waras dan mesra yang tidak mudah dikikis abjad. Memang harimau nan garang telah pergi, tapi ditinggalkannya belang yang sakit. Dirinya berbenderang bagi bangsa, makin marah, menyala, merangsang. Kini, bolehkah didengar bisik syahdu merangkul teteman, bukannya seteru? Bolehkah hajat yang ramah bersaudara, tali yang tak putus, air yang tak tumpah? Memang sebuah obor ketiba padam, tapi marak semula dalam ingatan. Tak akan kekok sambut tangannya, karena tangan itu harum. Memang harimau dan garang telah pergi, tapi disemaikan semangat berani. Dirinya berbenderang bagi bangsa, akan marah, menyala, pejabat. Dan melihat, setiap kali melihat gambarnya saya teringat. Dia berkata, jangan main-main.
Tuan dan puan-puan, sekali lagi kami gemuruh dan selamat Said, sastrawan negara, atas perkataan-perkataan yang begitu indah. Tuan dan puan-puan yang saya hormati sekalian, pada 17 hari bulan April yang lalu, saya telah pergi ke Kampar pada jam 2 pagi bersama dengan penceramah yang seterusnya. Kita bergerak ke Ipoh dan seterusnya memastikan saudara Karpal Singh selamat kembali ke Pulau Pinang. Majlis dengan segala hormatnya ingin menjemput saudara Jagdeep Singh Dio nak sulung saudara Karpal Singh untuk memberikan ucapan.
Very good evening, Malam, P.Pinang, Chow, Chairman of P.Pinang, Yang Berhormat Tuan Lim Guan Eng, Right Honourable Chief Minister Penang, Yang Berhormat Tuan Lim Kit Siang, all leaders from the party, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for attending this memorial held in Penang for the Tiger of Jelutong, my father. It is appropriate that memorial is held here, Tim Lien Ting Hall at Han Chiang High School, which is situated in Dato Kramat constituency, my constituency, which is situated in Jelutong for the Tiger of Jelutong. Karpal Singh is my father, my mentor, my comrade, and my friend. It has been 18 days since my father passed away. Today I have to speak as a son, but one that I'm sure will share many, or if not all, of the memories that remind us of this beauty of a person, fighter of principles, justice and freedom. He was a man who embodied hope. Whenever we felt at a loss, he would act in such a manner so as to give us hope that the obstacle before us would be overcome. He gave us hope that Malaysia will definitely, by his law, become all that he dreamt it would become. A society where justice, constitution, freedom, and righteousness prevail. When we talk of principles, I must say that since I was born into a family of politics and law. Although he was my father at home, outside of the house, I grew up hearing, learning, and reading of Karpal being the fighter for those who were wrong. When I was about 7, I remember going to the Chaurasta market with my father, and someone said, "Thank you, sir. You will always win the fight." Being very young then, I actually thought my father was a boxer in a ring, like Muhammad Ali, always the winner. Until, of course, later in life, I understood he was that great man who fought, but who fought for justice in court as a lawyer and in parliament and the state assemblyman as a politician. His campaign for justice and freedom, of course, came with a price. On the 27th of October 1987, he was detained under the notorious Internal Security Act, that draconian and evil legislation
that took many a father away from his child, many a child away from his father. I was about to take SPM then. Because of that, my mother decided not to let me know my father had been arrested under the ISA. She said he was busy with cases in KL. I was not even allowed to read the papers as she didn't want the news to disrupt my studies. It was only about 6 weeks after my exams that she broke the news and we went to Kuala Lumpur to visit him. I was shocked to see that after spending 53 days in solitary confinement, I couldn't recognize him. His face was smaller than mine and he would not speak much. We were being watched. At that time, I had planned to further my studies after my Form 5. But having witnessed my father being incarcerated without trial, I had lost all faith in the system and had no desire to leave further my studies until my father was released. But it was to be in February 1989, rather 1988, after he was rearrested after his first successful habeas corpus application at the Ipoh High Court, that Karpal would tell me, however, to leave for my studies. He told me this whilst handcuffed to his hospital bed, KLGH, as he was unwell during his subsequent detention that had been brought to Kuala Lumpur. Not only was I dispirited at the system, but on that day, I was angry when he told me to leave further my studies. Pa, how can you tell me to go and pursue law when there is no law in this country? I said to him, handcuffed to his hospital bed, patiently looked me in the eye, said, son, always believe, don't lose faith. That is what he said. That was the man he was. A man of principle who believed in justice, despite having been incarcerated by the very system. Not only was he detained for a total of 15 months under the ISA, but he had also been charged twice under the infamous Sedition Act. The first time he was charged under the Sedition Act was for making remarks as Anwar Ibrahim's counsel in court during the course of his trial. That charge brought about such condemnation by the local and international legal fraternity that the Attorney General had no choice to substitute. Next, due to the Perak constitutional crisis in 2009, Karpal expressed his legal opinion. What the Sultan of Perak had done was unconstitutional. Again, the man of principle spoke his mind without fear or favor. That he was charged for the second time for sedition. Several prominent persons had even approached him and said that if he apologized to the Sultan, then the charges against him would be withdrawn. But this man of principle stood fast in his principles and refused to budge. Finally, just before his demise, the system which he believed in so much, found him guilty, convicted him. Although the DPP requested for a custodial sentence, the court fined him 4,000. The appeal by Karpal and the DPP are now pending. As his son, having seen all the ups and downs he has gone through, I cannot but keep wondering what an amazing man of principle he was. As he aptly put it, there may be no permanent friends, there may be no permanent enemies, but there must be permanent principles. But, ladies and gentlemen, that man of permanent principles met his untimely demise, died a convict, sentenced by the system he had so much hope for, which he never lost faith. Do you think this man is a convict? Ladies and gentlemen, do you think Karpal Singh is a convict? Yes or no? It is indeed strange to say that he died a convict. When we reminisce how many thousands of Malaysians of all walks of life, of all differing political affiliations, including the Deputy Prime Minister himself, paid their last respects to him. Surely that is not a recognition of a convict, but a recognition of a man of principle whose legacy will forever live on. In fact, somebody during the funeral came up to me and said, Jagdeep, look at the amount of recognition that your father is getting, all the good that he has done. Surely he should deserve pardon. But I don't think Karpal would want that. All the recognition was for his principles. For his principles, he stood convicted. And he fought, but unfortunately could not pursue his appeal. I believe Gobind Ram will continue his appeal till the end. Before I end, on behalf of my family, I wish to again record our sincerest appreciation to the Penang State Government for having accorded my late father a public funeral with state honours, and even naming a road after him. I also wish to thank all those who came and paid their last respects for the kind words of condolences and prayers. I will miss you, my dearest loving father. My grandchildren will miss their endearing, ever-loving grandfather. Rest in peace.
Ladies and gentlemen, we'd like to call upon Mr. Ang Chun Hock to come on stage to give his token medallion to Saudara Jagdeep Singh. Mr. Ang? Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to share a few words written in honor of warriors of justice and democracy. As for my father, the late P.Pinang, when he passed on, I believe these words are apt for our dear Karpal Singh today. His sudden death on a Thursday morning was hard to accept by us who are mourning. He fought for justice all his life. Even ISA detention wasn't too high a price. He died as he had lived, with his principles intact. Even his fiercest rivals find hard to attack. Saudara Karpal Singh, you are truly the Mandela of Malaysia.
And today, we are all Karpal Singh. Next, I would like to call upon young matron who would like to dedicate a song, You Raise Me Up, to Saudara Karpal Singh.
Raise me up so I can stand on mountains. Raise me up to walk on stormy seas. I am strong when I am on your shoulders. Raise me more than I can. life, life without love. Each restless heart, it's so imperfect. But when you come, I am filled with wonder. Sometimes I feel like this eternity. Raise me up so I can stand up mountains. Raise me up to walk on stormy seas. I am strong when I am on your shoulder. Raise me up to more than I can be. Raise me up so I can stand up mountains. Raise me up to walk on stormy seas. I am strong when I am on your shoulders. Raise me up to more than I can be. Raise me up so I can stand on mountains. You raise me up to walk on stormy seas. I am strong when I am on your shoulders. Raise me up to more than I can be. Raise me up to more than I can be.
Terima kasih kepada Matron atas nyanyian yang begitu bagus sekali. Tuan-tuan dan puan-puan, saudara dan saudari yang saya hormati sekalian, penceramah seterusnya telah menulis beberapa artikel yang amat bagus pada pendapat saya berhubung dengan saudara Karpal Singh. Beliau juga merupakan anak kelahiran kita di Pulau Pinang. Majlis dengan segala hormatnya ingin menjemput Yang Berhormat Datuk Mujahid Yusof Rawah untuk memberikan ucapan beliau.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi taala wabarakatuh. Salam sejahtera dan selamat malam. Yang berbahagia Madam Medtau, seterusnya kepada seluruh keluarga mendiang Karpal, rakan seperjuangan saya Jakdip dan juga Govindio, seterusnya kepada Yang Amat Berhormat Ketua Menteri P.Pinang, pengurusi DAP Negeri Pulau Pinang, Hormat Saudara At that moment, the Dewan was in uproar with the laughter. Karpal was also known for his biting words, such as "jangan main-main." Whenever he wanted to push for action to be taken, his Indian slang in the Malay language always tickled us, but the content of his speech always got the attention of the BN side due to his poisonous attacks on the BN MPs. Without Singh is king, the Dewan will definitely be a silent place. In all honesty, I am too dwarfish. I am too small actually to speak about him. Compared to the stature of Karpal in the Malaysian politics. When he first entered politics in 1974, I was only standard 4 in the primary school. But yet, I became interested of this personality in the late 90s. In 2005, I returned to my hometown, Penang, from Laka. The first time I met him was during a visit when he was hospitalized. Although I could not find the time to speak to him due to his condition, but I managed to convey representative of past Central Committee to his beautiful wife. My subsequent with him was as a new MP, learning the ropes of debating in Parliament, and I found his speech, Karpal's speech in the Parliament, mainly centering on legal issues and the judiciary, including his revelation of judicial misconduct, which could erode the credibility of courts in Malaysia. And this is one thing that I must make it very clear to everyone. Behind the pressure of Karpal's attitude of being supposedly anti-Hudud and anti-Islamic State, including his controversial statement, "over my dead body first," I would like to stress here from the deep of my heart, Stoppers remember that Karpal announced in front of all the PAS and PKR leadership, as well as the participants of the convention, that he respected Islam as the official religion of the Federation, and stated that in the Federal Constitution he was never against Islam as Malaysia's official religion. And in one of his interviews, he even said this: "I'm not opposed to Islam at all. I am a God-fearing man." Karpal is a member of the legal fraternity. His assertion had never veered on the ideology of opposition towards religious appreciation, as his interest was more towards the legal ideology. He has stressed many times, in fact in one of his statements, when asked why he could not accept the concept of Islamic State, he answered, "My opposition to Islamic State is to preserve and defend the Constitution." Understanding Karpal logic is understanding him as a legal man, not as someone understood. It is not easy for us to accuse another as anti-Islam just on the basis of their rejection based on the legal basis. In my view, to be anti-religion, one would need to be driven by hatred and hostility towards all meanings of religion, including the rejection of Islam as the federation of officials. And this is one interesting piece that I want to share. It's my tribute to Karpal tonight. Karpal and us. As a past leader who is always linked to be in direct encounter with Karpal is the former Kelantan Menteri Besar, Datuk Seri Setia Tentara Tuan Guru Nik Abdul Aziz. However, the whole nation saw a historic meeting of cordial warmth between the two great leaders at Karpal's home the 27th of January 2013, when the Murshidul Am Guru Nik Aziz visited Karpal in Penang while accepting birthday cake from Karpal, as it was his Guru Nik Aziz's birthday. Both were warm towards each other, despite having a completely opposite stand between them. The openness of Tuan Guru Nik Abdul Aziz, the symbol of past commitment in respecting rights to disagree, despite being in a single political position. Karpal, meanwhile, has always held a positive stance on past. From his very own words, which prove his sentiments and attitude. He has once said, when asked about past, he said, we may have our differences with past, but past is a solid principal party and an important ally. The Speaker of Dewan Rakyat will be one who would be missing Karpal Singh. In objecting the rulings made by the Speaker, his sharpness in raising legal arguments in the acts debated and his criticism against the judiciary of this country has always been venomous and heightened. Yet, we, the young MPs, have lost a senior MP who always managed to make both friends and enemies mad and jovial when he debates. The judges, who had always tested their integrity at the maximum level. Members of the AP have lost a spirited voice who once said, on the background of the DAP's loss in Penang a while ago, when he said, be careful, the injured tiger as it is more dangerous. The civil society once knew Karpal will not forget his words when he said, it is important for every citizen in this country to know that no one is above the law. And on his confidence in the legal moral principle that he became or he had encountered problem with the royalty in this country. For someone who is firm in the world of politics and legal, Malaysia would also feel the loss of its son, who fervently protected the principles of the Federal Constitution with great honesty. Lastly, the question of whether what Karpal did was right or wrong is never an issue. This is how this great man showed his love to the country by defending the Federal Constitution. It was a moment silent in the ruckus of the voices slamming the tiger of Jeruto when news of his tragic death filtered through and was broadcasted across the nation. The tiger no longer roars, but his stripes have left their indelible mark as did his name. The words of the deceased will continue to ring loud in the ears of his friends and foes. As he once said, you knock out one Karpal Singh, 100 Karpal Singh will rise. Thank you very much. Bye, Comrade Karpal.
Thank you, Saudara Mujahid. Despite being confined to a wheelchair, he still came to Batu Kawan constituency to campaign for me, and then to Bukit Gelugo for a late ceramah, sometimes after 12 midnight, and often teasing the policemen and the special branch there. Kalau berani, tangkaplah. Uncle Karpal's presence in Batu Kawan, needless to say, sealed my victory there. Today it gives me great pleasure and honor to invite the little tiger of Puchong, Saudara Gobind Singh.
Terima kasih. Saya ucapkan kepada saudari pengurusi majlis yang saya hormati, ibu saya, Tuan Guru Mitko, abang saya, Karpal Singh, adik saya, Karpal Singh, Ketua Menteri Pulau Pinang, Saudara Lim Kuan Ing, pengurusi DAP Pulau Pinang, Saudara Menyau, sahabat seperjuangan saya, Saudara Lim Kit Siang, yang saya hormati, Saudara Pak Samad Saib, ahli-ahli parlimen yang hadir, Saudara Jeffrey, Thomas Su, semua adun yang hadir, Tok Kumarindran, sahabat saya, Saudara Ramakrishnan, Saudara Raya, semua kamu yang hadir malam ini. Tuan-tuan dan puan, pada 17 hari bulan April, satu peristiwa yang sangat mengejutkan seluruh negara. On the 17th of April this year, 2014, news rang out at about 2 a.m. of an accident which resulted in the tragic passing of my father, Mr. Karpal Singh. This belief, not only here in Malaysia, but internationally. I received a call at 2:30 that morning from London, asking me if it was true. It was difficult to confirm the news and say it was true. I keep saying and I repeat, no one is ever ready to lose a loved one. And no one is ever ready to lose a loved one in circumstances as tragic as that of what happened on the 17th of April. But this is history. And his story, people will remember. in Malaysia, people will remember. If there was someone whose passing affected each and every one of us, it was the passing of the legend Saudara Karpal Singh. We speak, and today we hear many things said about Saudara Karpal. We hear his friends to you about him being the lawyer. We hear fellow politicians speak about him, the politician. We've heard my brother speak about him. Ladies and gentlemen, what is important is for us to remember how he lived. Because here was a man who fought for us, fought for this country, believing that this country can change one day. A Malaysia where all Malaysians are equal and treated fairly by our government. If there was darkness, it was Mr. Karpal who was the light. If there was weakness, it was him who gave us strength. But now that he is no longer with us, the question which arises is this. And we are here today gathered on a historic day, the 5th of May, 2014. A year ago here, celebrations in Penang, victorious Pakatan Rakyat. The question which arises, ladies and gentlemen, is this. Are we going to back down now that Mr. Karpal Singh is no longer with us? Do we stop our fight because he is no longer here with us? Or do we remember the spirit that he left? The fighting spirit that the tiger of Julutong left behind? Do we remember him, and do we take on herefrom to make sure that in the next elections we see his dream, we see it realized, we see a new Malaysia, new government in Putrajaya? And this is what, ladies and gentlemen, my father, Mr. Karpal Singh, would want. The tiger never gave up. From the beginning, he made it clear that he would not waver in his principles. My brother said he was a man of principle. Indeed, he was. Righteous, just, principle. But ladies and gentlemen, today here, we also must remember Michael Cornelius. Michael Cornelius, the man who stood behind Mr. Karpal Singh. The man who sacrificed his life for his master, Mr. Karpal Singh. I know, I have seen Michael at times, difficult situations, even bringing Mr. Karpal in and out of Parliament. And I'm sure YB Mujahid can attest to that. We have all seen. But this was a man who was committed fully towards making sure that Mr. Karpal Singh, his master, always stood high in society. And I think it is important for us to remember and recognize his contributions, and to say tonight also our deepest condolences to his family. In addition to that, ladies and gentlemen, there is also another person that must be mentioned. This person who dedicated her life to Mr. Karpal Singh. This person who went through pain for years, quietly, in silence, but making sure at all times she stood behind her man, her husband, Mr. Karpal Singh, the legend. This, ladies and gentlemen, is my mother, Madam Gurmit Kaur. And I think all of us here should give her a round of applause. Bukan senang. Not easy not easy playing a role that she played. Ladies and gentlemen, I remember in 1987, apabila bapak saya ditahan di bawah ISA, saya masih ingat lagi. Masa itu muda, umur 14 tahun. Budak kecil di sekolah. Memang saya tidak tahu apa berlaku masa itu. Jagdeep rightly put it, we as children of the family, we were perhaps the last to know. At that time, my youngest brother, Karpal Singh, was only 3 months old. 3 bulan umurnya. Baby. My mum, with Karpal, told of the news of my father. Many days were spent trying to even find out where he was, whether he was alive or not. And subsequently, when we managed to find out where he was, managed to demand that we be given rights to see him, those rights denied. I remember my mom sitting in Jalan Banda police station almost 2 days with my youngest brother in her arms, just waiting for an appointment to see my father. Inilah apa yang mereka lakukan kepada keluarga-keluarga mereka yang ditahan di bawah akta seperti akta ASA, akta yang salim yang dipakai oleh kerajaan Malaysia. Sitting there for 2 days. We didn't know where they were. Lim Guan Eng, Lim Kit Siang, also detained. The families of all of them. We see here today the MC, Saudari Kasturi Rani Pato, her father, likewise detained. And when we get the appointment to see Mr. Karpal, what do we see? We see a man who is half his size. A man who doesn't want to speak much in the presence of police officers because he knows that whatever is said is being recorded. A man who could only smile at you, but yet when you looked in his eyes, you could see the pain and suffering that he was going through. Motionless, silence, pain. And this went on for 60 days. After which, detention orders were issued. He was detained in Kamunting. Dikeluarkan perintah tahanan 2 tahun yang ditandatangani oleh Dr. Mahathir Mohamad, the Prime Minister himself, who was Home Minister at the time. But Mr. Karpal did not back down. He did not give in. True to what Dato' Kumarendran had said, here was a man that would not give up without a fight. He filed his own habeas corpus case in High Court Ipoh. And I remember my mother, Mrs. Karpal, almost daily trips, which then subsequently went on to weekend trips to Kamunting, up and down. Despite this, she carried on. She stood by. Now he was released in 1989. When he came out of detention, he was even more committed to fight for justice in this country. Why? Because he had gone through it himself. He had not only seen it, but he had also felt it, the injustice that was brought upon people who were treated this way by our government. He stood up, fought. And in those years, built up his career again. My mom again stood by him all this while we were educated overseas. And then in 2005, ladies and gentlemen, an accident in front of our house. I think most of you can recall that day. Again, a day in which all of us felt shivers. Mr. Karpal was injured. Spinal injuries which left him almost bedridden. He suffered immensely, ladies and gentlemen. But who was it that stood by him and nursed him back? Who was it that took him to the hospitals and stayed with him in the hospitals and brought him back piece by piece? The lady that really sacrificed everything to make sure that Mr. Karpal once again rose as the legend of Malaysia, to continue what he does best for us Malaysians. It is this lady, Mrs. Karpal Singh. Ladies and gentlemen, I think whilst we pay tribute to my father tonight, we must also pay tribute to this wonderful lady. And we must assure her that all of us would carry on in this fight. We must tell her now that all this is not in vain. We must tell her that what he left behind, we will carry forth and we will succeed. Ladies and gentlemen, I have been fortunate enough to have such a great father, such a great employer. I have appeared in court many times with him. A great man to be in court with, because you know that in court, if you had him next to you, you had extra strength. It didn't matter if you lost your case. To him, what was important is that you fight. You must fight. Lose or win doesn't matter. But of course, if you win, that's a bonus. Simple-minded, resilient, strong, able to stand up to judges and tell them that they were wrong if they were wrong. Able to stand up to the Attorney General of this country and tell him that what he was doing was not correct. Able to stand up to even the rulers of this country where he thought that what they did was not right. This is the man that we speak of today, Karpal Singh, the legend of Malaysia. So ladies and gentlemen, in Parliament, what you hear from Saudara Mujahid, I think we will miss him. We will. To me, again as I said, a privilege and an honor to have had my father next to me in Parliament. Of course, sometimes, not sometimes, I think most of the time, when there was an argument, both he and me would get involved, and it was either me or him that would get suspended. But that was Mr. Karpal for you. When there was an argument, and he was behind you, and he knew that you were in trouble, he would make sure that he stands up for you as well. And I think most of the junior MPs would agree to that. It was great having him in the Dewan, because as far as you're concerned, you know that when he is there, no matter what the Barisan Nasional throws at you, you are confident that you will win the fight. But in the Dewan Rakyat, we also have someone else. Someone who's been fighting with Mr. Karpal for years. Not just now. More than 4 decades. Someone who we all know, still with us today, still fighting. A person who Mr. always says is responsible for the DAP and for Pakatan Rakyat winning Penang in 2008 and 2013. A man who was a best friend to Mr. Karpal, and a man who I have seen attend all the memorials held for Mr. Karpal since his death. But till today, still very upset about it. One can understand why. And ladies and gentlemen, this man is Saudara Lam Kit Siang. And of course, we have to also pay tribute and thanks to the state government of Penang. Ladies and gentlemen, my father was given a funeral with state honors. I think that's a privilege that he deserved. But a funeral with state honors cannot succeed in itself. A funeral with state honors is not a success if it does not have the support of the people. If it does not have the show of strength of the people who grieve together with us for the loss of a hero. But in this case, as rightly pointed out by Saudara Ramakrishna, if you thought the thousands that came to the house to pay their last respects to him was shocking and surprising, you would have been even more overwhelmed with the thousands, the sea of people who came to see him off in Dewan Sri Penang. I, on behalf of the family of Mr. Karpal Singh, thank you, the Rakyat of Penang, the Rakyat of Malaysia, for giving the hero the farewell that he deserved. Ladies and gentlemen, I come to the end of the speech to remind you. I spoke to Saudara Lim Guan Eng. There's no amount of words that I can say to thank you, Chief Minister. And mention must be made of his exco. Saudara P. was around somewhere. All of them who came to the house, who were there with us as family. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we must remember, within us lives the spirit of the tiger. On the 17th of April, all of us felt like a small part of us was ripped away. Until today, we still feel that emptiness inside of us. And I can tell you that emptiness is going to be there for a long time, because Mr. Karpal Singh is simply irreplaceable. But the spirit he leaves behind, that spirit must live in us. The rare, you know what I talk about. There are others here that I need to mention, who of course deserve also mention. There are Jeffrey. I don't know where Jeffrey Scully is. Jeffrey, are you here? He's probably around somewhere. It is these people who helped my father towards the end. And I, from the bottom of my heart, thank all of you. Ladies and gentlemen, never forget. Never forget this name and the man. When in concluding, this is something I said in Puchong as well. Himanshu is looking at me, but I'm going to talk. There is a word that is coined, and if you don't believe me, you can look at the Urban Dictionary. For those of you who've got iPads with you, handphones, just type out the word. Karpalism. It is spelled Karpalism. And what does it mean? It means this: the spirit of courage to speak and fight for the underdogs. This term is coined to honor the late Y.B. Karpal Singh, also known as the Tiger of Jelutong, who fought fearlessly to uphold justice in both his legal and political careers. Quote phrase: he was a fearless man. He practiced Karpalism in fighting justice. Ladies and gentlemen, I ask you this: is there Karpalism in you? Is there Karpalism in us? Will there be Karpalism in the fight that we continue to make sure that we wrest Malaysia a new government in 2018? Is there Karpalism in us? Make sure, ladies and gentlemen, as a tribute to him, we carry on, continue his fight, and we succeed in the next elections. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
Sekali lagi terima kasih kepada saudara Gobind Singh Dio. Tuan-tuan dan puan-puan, saudara dan saudari yang saya hormati sekalian, pada tahun lepas 29 hari bulan April 2013, kita mengadakan satu perhimpunan harapan rakyat di Penang, Sekolah Menengah Han Chiang, di mana kita telah berjaya menarik sebanyak 70,000 orang untuk datang dan bersama kita pada malam tersebut. Dan pada malam tersebut, penceramah yang seterusnya memegang payung dan bersama dengan saudara Karpal Singh sepanjang ucapan beliau. Dan majlis dengan segala hormatnya ingin menjemput saudara Ram Karpal Singh untuk memberikan ucapan. Persilakan.
Ladies and gentlemen, yang amat berhormat Ketua Menteri Pulau Pinang, Saudara Penang, Saudara Chow Kon Yao, Saudara Lim Kit Siang, Saudara Gobind Singh Dio, Saudara Jagdeep Singh Dio, kawan-kawan sekalian, family and friends. Han Chiang School brings back memories to me, brings back very fond memories. A little over a year ago, I stood out with my father in this very school grounds on a very rainy evening. I remember holding the umbrella when my father spoke next to his wheelchair. He spoke for about 40 minutes, half an hour. And when he finished, he suddenly said to me, "Boy, you carry on." And this was before a crowd of 70,000 people. And so I did. I carried on. I spoke about election irregularities for about 5 to 7 minutes. When I spoke, he sat next to me in his wheelchair. I will never forget that night. That was the first time I spoke in public, and I have the privilege and honor to say that I did it with him by my side. Mr. Gobind pointed out the accident in 2005, which left my father in a wheelchair. That wheelchair is on this stage. Many thought that he would be slowed down as a result of his accident. Many thought that he would be a write-off. In fact, I remember back in 2005, about a month or so, maybe 2 after the accident, in March, thereabouts, I remember a lot of word going around that the BN were rejoicing that this had happened, and that the Karpal Singh that they knew would not be the same again. But how wrong were they? How wrong were they to have thought that? What happened after that, ladies and gentlemen? What happened after that was a tiger who roared louder. And that tiger roared in a wheelchair. It mattered not whether he was in a wheelchair or not. What mattered was his spirit. And that spirit, ladies and gentlemen, that spirit lives on, despite him not being with us today anymore. On the night of the 16th of this month of April, I was with my father in Kuala Lumpur. We had prepared to leave Kuala Lumpur for Penang that night. Brother Gobin, unfortunately, had been admitted into the Pantai hospital in Kuala Lumpur. He's alright, as you saw, very fit and able. My parents, mom and dad, had gone to visit him at the Pantai Medical Center that night. Came back to the house and got ready to leave for Penang, as we had a case to attend to the next day. We left Kuala Lumpur at about 11 o'clock, and I spoke to my father in that vehicle for a good half an hour, 45 minutes, and we laughed, we joked. And I remember in that journey, before he fell asleep, I remember saying to him how disillusioned I was about the judiciary because of certain cases which I won't go into now, which had left me wondering whether there was any hope left in this system. Before he fell asleep, ladies and gentlemen, in that car, he left me assured that despite my feeling of disillusionment, there was hope. That is what Mr. Karpal was all about, ladies and gentlemen. The trials and tribulations that he had gone through in his life, trials and tribulations, the ups and downs, being detained under the ISA for nearly 2 years in the late 80s, never ever deterred his spirit. Karpal Singh, ladies and gentlemen, came up from nothing. He used to help in rearing cows as a child. That was the kind of humble beginnings that he came from. And when he left us, ladies and gentlemen, he left us with that same humble spirit. He was a man who never knew what it was like not to be humble, because that was the kind of person he naturally was. And ladies and gentlemen, I have asked myself over these past 18 days or so, why? Why was he taken away from us the way he was? Why were we not given notice? Why the abrupt ending? But ladies and gentlemen, despite my despair, despite my sadness, despite my anger, I'm beginning to understand now that he has not left us. He might not be with us physically, but his spirit lives on. Ladies and gentlemen, I want you to know this, and I want you to remember how Karpal Singh lived his life. Because, ladies and gentlemen, that symbolizes what he was all about. I am deeply saddened, together with my family, my mom, my brothers, my sister, about the way he went and the fact that he is no longer with us. But I cannot or could not have asked for a better father. He was everything to me. Everything I know, I learned from him. I worked with him in the KL office, followed him on many campaigns in his past, election campaigns, since I can't remember. But today, I have to say that he's no longer with me physically. Unfortunately, I have to come to terms with that. But ladies and gentlemen, I leave you with this. I leave you with the legacy that my father has left behind. And that legacy, ladies and gentlemen, I assure you, will carry on. With that, I thank you.
Thank you, Saudara Ram Karpal. Our next speaker is a graduate from Kamunting Detention Camp. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together for Saudara Lim Kit Siang, Opposition Leader of Parliament for DAP and Member of Parliament for Gelang Patah.
Thank you. The deep vein from Chao, C, P.Pinang, Penang, Chimster, Malam, Orient, my classmate for a while, aliran the locations, saudara saudari Malam salam.亲爱的宾客们，马来西亚同胞，大家晚间好。We are here to mourn, to remember, and to celebrate a Malaysian legend, Karpal Singh. 我们今晚是来掉纪念，而且更加重要的是来庆祝一个伟大的马来西亚的子弟的过世。In his life, Karpal created history in politics and in law. But the greatest history he created is when he died. We are still mourning We are still mourning for Karpal 18 days. And not tonight you can see. Never before has a Malaysians passing met with such a great outpouring of grief. Not only the 3-day wake and the funeral where tens of thousands came out in sorrow, the last respect, but up and down the country. Today is the Penang Memorial. Before that, we had a memorial service for Karpal in Johor, in Malacca, in Negeri Sembilan, in Kuala Lumpur, in Selangor, in Perak, all over the country. Malaysians, regardless of race, of religion, of class, even political belief, all came forward in grief, in respect, in love. I don't think there has been another Malaysian who has his passing have created such a shattering effect, like Rama has mentioned, on the people of Malaysia. And that is a remark, a tribute to the greatness of Saudara Karpal Singh. 18天了，马来西亚人民不论种族、宗教，甚至政治的信仰，而是阶级，大家都感觉到是个人的损失。我们有一个空洞，感觉到一个伟大，因为他是人民的大医师 ，is the voice of the voiceless, a champion of the oppressed, and a people's leader. In fact, tomorrow, what is going to happen tomorrow is a reminder to us the need for the continuation of the struggle that Karpal has dedicated his whole life for justice, for freedom, for democracy, for the rule of law. Tomorrow, another member of parliament of DAP is going to charge in court for sedition. Teresa Kok is going to charge in court for his Chinese New Year video, Wonderful Malaysia. And it is indeed a wonderful Malaysia. There are member of parliament like Teresa Kok can be charged for sedition indeed. 明天我们有一位国会议员，我们是不对的国会议员葛淑庆会被送上法庭煽动法庭，为什么？因为新年大家看到吗？那个录影带 Wonderful Malaysia 煽动。That's what Karpal has dedicated his whole life to bring about change, a rule of law. Where there is justice, there is freedom, there is equality, there is democracy for all Malaysians, not like the Sedition Act. And I think one thing we must remember, Karpal is we must continue to fight for the removal, the abolition of draconian laws like the Sedition Act, for which just before his passing, Karpal was convicted for sedition. I remember sedition because that was how Karpal started. He started the DAP helping to fight the battle against injustice. Sedition case, 1970. The industry case of Pan Yu Ting, of Wiki Sik, the Penang DAP chairman at that time. And Karpal was in the very forefront. A series of sedition cases, ending with Guanang sedition case. And now his own case. And tomorrow we won't have Karpal, but we have all the new Karpals in the party who will be fighting against the sedition charge against Teresa Kok. 我还记得我第一次见到Karpal的是在我第一次内部安全法令被扣留过后被释放。我1969年。第一次被中选为马来西亚社区国会议员，一件事情他们做的就是逮捕我，让我去吃咖喱饭。1999年发生微山黑暗的日子，国会不只是被冻结，政治也被禁止，不能被有这样错动。到了1970年1月 4月1号我被释放，那时候开始恢复国会政治活动被准许，这个时候我就见到了第一次见到Karpal Singh，在这就见那个时候很多人猜测这是行动党，但是要参加行动党，因为要面对当权者的压迫，没有讲过。但是Karpal Singh不同，他敢在站出来，在最前线跟行动党的领袖共同并肩作战，来争取一个公平合理的一个马来西亚人的马来西亚。I think the first time I met Karpal Singh was after my ISA detention from Muar. I was elected as member of parliament for Penang Melaka. In 1969, the first thing they did was to detain me under the Internal Security Act. Not only was parliament suspended, legal activities were prohibited until October 1970, when they want to resume restored parliament and allowed legal activities to take place. At that time, the DAP had a lot of support from the public, but very few people were prepared to come in the forefront because they have to incur the wrath of the powers that be and to stick their neck out. But Karpal was very different. He was prepared to come in the very forefront to help to lead in this struggle for justice, freedom, equality, and a Malaysian Malaysia. When he joined the DAP, Jagdeep and Gopin was still not around. Very, very young. And 44 years we have fought together. 44 years we have walked the difficult road to build a new Malaysia. The second time was detained under the Internal Security Act. Karpal came along. Both of us went into Kamunting. That was 1987. I can still remember the day of 27 October 1987. 我第一次被内部安全法那边扣的时候，Karpal跟我一起被扣留，进入高文地。我还记得在1987年10月27号，毛草行动第一天 ，Operation Malam first day. The first to be arrested was, of course, Lim Guan Eng. He was trapped. In a way, he was trapped by the police. He was to give a police statement. On some report, he lodged 1 or 2 weeks earlier. So and Parliament was sitting on the 27th of October. So it was arranged for him to go to the Jalan Pandang police station at about 11 o'clock to give a statement with Kim Hock. They went and never came out. He was detained under the Internal Security Act. At that time, Parliament was sitting. So we will make inquiries. We were surprised. We were supposed to come back and meet somebody for lunch in Parliament. He never came back. But by that time, we were receiving reports that a dragnet had started, mass arrests taking place. But at that time, nobody knew. The press didn't know that the DAP leaders were being targeted. But by about 3 o'clock, 3:30, the CPO of KL confirmed to me that when he has been arrested. So by about 5 or 6 p.m., myself, Karpal, and a few MPs decided to go to the Jalan Pandang police station to find out what exactly is happening to Guan Eng and to Kim Hock. Brought along, of course, some basic materials, toothbrush, soap, and all that, towels for them, for their use. We went to the police station and they didn't allow us to go in. At first, we were not allowed entering into the police station. But later on, they said, yeah, all right, 3 MPs can come in. Siang, Karpal Singh, and another person. 3 can go in. We thought we were very, very lucky to be able to be allowed to go into the police station and to find out what is happening to Guan Eng and Kirk. Went in, we were asked to sit in the police office for a while. All left, nobody came in. For quite some time, I told Karpal, I think we are in trouble. I think we are in trouble, we cannot go out. Karpal said, how can? Impossible. But it was true. We walked into a trap, we went in, we never came out. Of course, then we were separated. before they took us to the Batu boarding center for solitary confinement 60 days. We never saw each other. In those 60 days, we were kept separate until at the end of a confinement period, 60-day custodial period, when we were told that we were being officially detained under the Internal Security Act. But during that period, of course, they tried to use psychological tactics to try to undermine us. They would come and tell me, I said, Karpal Singh already confessed. Karpal Singh already on the television already confessing they was wrong. Why are you putting out? You admit you are wrong, whatever it is. And later on, Karpal Singh told me that yes, they said something about me also. They were going to tell Karpal, why are you holding out? Why are you so stupid? Just admit. Lim Kit Siang already on television. Of course, these are the tactics they use everywhere. At the end of the 60 days, we were being sent to Kamanting. When we come out, we were at that time handcuffed with goggles. We couldn't see where we are. We have to be led to the Black Maria. During the Black Maria, I know that several people were being brought in. I don't know who they are because I couldn't see them. Then I found a presence which I felt was quite familiar. So I asked, Karpal Singh, are you around? And she said, yes, he was around. And that's where we reconnected. We went all the way to Kamping. As Rubin has mentioned, Karpal is a irreplaceable loss. But what's important is the biggest tribute we can give to Karpal, the memory of Karpal, is to continue what he hoped for, what he's dreamed of, for a better Malaysia. A Malaysian dream. It's your dream, my dream, our dream for a Malaysia where every one of us can have developed our full potential. Today is the first anniversary of 13th general elections, May the 5th. 今天是5月5，对不对？今天是不是5月5？ 5月5该做什么？5月5有没有换到？没有换到。5th of May is a date. 1 year ago, the people of Malaysia wanted to bring about ubah, a change so that we can begin to restore justice, freedom, rule of law, and democracy in Malaysia. We missed it, although we had the support of the majority of the voters. This is the day where Karpal should be with us to mark the first anniversary of May the 5th. But he's not with us. But I think the best tribute will be to dedicate the next general elections. The 14th general elections, dedicate it to the memory of Karpal. 可以不可以？让我们纪念来届大选记得卡巴一生的贡献，而争取自由、民主、法律至上。The rule of law, most important, the rule of law encompasses everything that is necessary if Malaysia is going to be a united, harmonious, prosperous, progressive country. Not only an independent judiciary, not only a true, a just, a fair, a rule of law, but a clean government, good governance, no corruption, integrity, and a just and fair and effective national institutions in the country where a disaster like the MH370 cannot happen. A whole series of mistakes and wrongs. So I and my tribute to Karpal by asking every one of you to remember, dedicate ourselves the next general elections to the memory of what Karpal has given his whole life to bring about a more just and more equal Malaysian society. Thank you very much.
Terima kasih kepada saudara Lim Kit Siang, Ketua Ahli Parlimen DAP, juga Ahli Parlimen bagi kawasan Gelang Bakar. Tuan dan puan-puan, seterusnya majlis dengan segala hormatnya ingin menjemput Yang Amat Berhormat Saudara Lim Guan Eng, Ketua Menteri Pulau Pinang, Rangkap Setiausaha Agong DAP untuk memberi ucapan. 大会由恭请滨州首席部长兼民主行动党秘书长林冠英同志上台致辞。
Madam Grooming Forum by Siang, Chief Leader of the MMP, Baca Panjau, CD di Penang. Jadi, laksanaan saya, kawan negara, Sahabat rakyat Malaysia, juga yang rumah jahit, pada semua ramah dan pada semua panel-panel pidato untuk peringati saudara Karpal Singh, apa-apa yang sekalian, malam dan salam bersih kepada semua. Saya maklum, beri gelap, beri sebagai gelap. 各位亲爱的槟城同胞，大家晚上好。首先，我要代表民主行动党感谢所有的出席者参加行动党所举办的Karpal Singh同志的追思会，谢谢大家的出席。 谢谢大家的关怀，谢谢大家的爱戴。First, let me extend my deepest condolences to the people and the family of this irreplaceable loss. We know that no words can substitute pain and that hole in your heart left by someone. We will miss him soon, not only as a leader, as a comrade, but also as a friend. I think we miss him most of all is his faith and belief, not only in the DAP, but in the people of Penang and Malaysia. He believed, and how he believed that we will overcome, that we will prevail, and victory will be ours, provided we don't give up, we never surrender. Karpal Singh 相信，虽然面对风风雨雨，虽然受到很大的打压和打击，最终我们会承担正义，因为他对是单单对行动党有信心，最重要，他对槟城人民和马来西亚人民有信心。2008年大选证明。 这几十出，2013年差一点打倒政府，如果不是玩臭的话，我们就是中央政府了了。
所以我们不能够放弃，对不对？我们不能够放弃我们这个斗争，因为如果放弃这个斗争，就是放过国政，绝对不能够放过武统和国政啊！ The most important of all that we miss from Karpal is his fighting spirit. You know, my father wept when we lost Karpal. And he said that Karpal should not end like this. Because he wanted Karpal to be there when we finally threw out Barisan Nasional. Fate is sometimes not by choice. Fate is destined. But I believe that even though Karpal may not be present when we throw out Barisan Nasional and UMNO, we must make this happen for Karpal Singh. And how can we make it happen? Remember his fighting spirit. Remember his emphasis of right against wrong. Remember never to give up hope and believe always in the people of Penang and Malaysia. 怎么样能够胜？怎么样能够确保我们完成他这个美梦？来进不成。什么美梦？马来西亚的美梦。马来西亚的美梦不是政府的美梦，是你和我老百姓的美梦。让普通人民，如果是用功努力的话，能够过更好的日子。让普通人民能够享有法律给的公平的对待。我们有法治，有一视同仁的法治，能够给我们基本权利，让我们成为一个马来西亚堂堂正正一等公民，享有平等民主权益，让我们的孩子都获得平等经济、教育和就业机会，给我们一个更美好的明天。会过分吗？会不会过分？能够达到吗？哦，当然说有可能不能够达到。国政太霸道，武统太狼了。明天郭树新又会被重伤，一个一个在选票、在选举不能够打倒你，他就用这个手段滥用权力来把一个一个明年佛建的领袖干掉。我们有什么办法？有办法。我们要有这个精神，这个奋斗的精神，不然就爱打拼，对不对？对不对？按怎爱打拼？爱回去，我人是槟榔人啊！因为我人打拼，我人是槟榔人；因为我人无惊死，我人是槟榔人。因为我们要平等，我们要自由，最重要，我们要好，我们的孩子又更好，要更好的明天。这个不是单单你住在槟城才能够成为槟榔人，你要有这个精神，有理想，有原则，有正义。斗志，有勇气，和 最重要的是不愿意向胡同国政低头啊！浪就是槟榔郎，对不对？对不对？槟榔郎是单单在滨州，在全马来西亚，我们告诉胡同，你怎么样让我们不会放弃。你怎么样对付我们绝对不会放。我们要活得有尊严，我们要抬起头来，堂堂正正做马来西亚公民，对不对？我们告诉胡同，我人是槟榔人，准备站着死，好过跪着活啊！因为我人是槟榔人啊，对不对？好像Karpal Singh，冰城精神。槟榔人够不起耶，硬骨头不是软骨头，有骨气，有原则，有斗志，不是像那些只是大脚，只是会向胡同低头，只是会放弃。I do not wish to make a speech, except perhaps recite poem that is the favorite of Nelson Mandela, which I think give great meaning to the Karpal Singh. Poem Witness. Out of the night that covers me, black has split from home to good. I thank whatever gods may be for my unconquered soul. In the fell clutch of circumstance, I have not winced nor cried aloud. Under the bludgeonings of chance, my head is bloody but unbowed. Beyond this place of wrath and tears, looms but the horror of the shame, and yet the menace of the years finds and shall find me but a friend. It matters not how straight the gates, how charged with punishments. I am the master of my fate. Thank you. See. Di Malaysia ada satu konspirasi kesunyian. There's a conspiracy of silence in Malaysia, where truth is dangerous. You know, in this conspiracy of silence in Malaysia, a word of truth is like a pistol shot, according to one great poet. One great poet. Conspiracy of silence. A word of truth is like a pistol shot. Karpal has made many pistol shots, even though he never fired a gun. I think it is up to us to continue to speak the truth and let it sound as loud, or louder than a pistol shot. Tomorrow, battle continues, and Saudari Teresa Kong in charge of sedition. We will fight for her, just as we fight for all Malaysians. The battle. Join us in this battle, and together we shall overcome. 所以，希望大家能够继续下去，好不好？好不好？相信
槟城人、马来西亚人民也能。如果我们坚持下去，活着一定打开界限。Terima kasih. Nanti.
Sekali lagi, kita ingin ucapkan terima kasih kepada Yang Amat Berhormat Saudara Lim Guan Eng, Ketua Menteri Pulau Pinang merangkap Setiausaha Agong DAP.
We invite all those who like to pay their final respect to come up on stage to put the flowers on the table.
那么有请在场各位，如果想向卡巴辛同志献花的，那可以请稍等一会。那我们现在将进行这个献花的仪式。
We honor him today for his indomitable spirit and courage to carry on with the quest for justice, regardless of the price he had to pay. We admire him for not yielding to threats and retributions. We salute him for placing principles above everything else. We thank him for guiding us and for inspiring us to soldier on, even when everything seems hopeless, in the firm belief that we will eventually find that light to brighten our lives. Today, we stand tall, with every Malaysian here, with our heads held high, with our hearts full of courage, that you have left us to continue your fight against tyranny and oppression, to continue your struggle for a just and free society, to continue your war and battle for a Malaysian Malaysia.
卡巴辛同志曾经说过，如果你击倒了一个卡巴辛，那有成千上万个卡巴辛将一起站起来。那各位现场来宾，那希望呢，我们能够把卡巴辛无私的精神能够长存下去，能够承传下去。希望我们每个马来西亚人能够真正感受到卡巴辛同志为我们带来的改变。